Good morning and welcome to Writers and Readers. I'm Charlie Redner, the host of the show. Here we talk about writers that have come from Laguna Beach to London, England, and everything in between. We'll have a lot of local authors come on, and I want readers. This show I'm going to have some readers come in. We want to talk about books that you'd like to talk about. I know I have a half a dozen books I'd love to start talking about. Today we're going to talk to a local author, Nancy Clan Moran. And she's been here at least, I guess, 10 years, because I think 10 years ago I introduced her to this show and the book. And she's going to talk about The Clock of Life, one of my very favorite books of all the authors we have here in Laguna Woods. I've said it to her 100 times, and I'll continue to say it. She's got to be in the top 5. I can't name the number 1 because I know too many authors in this town, and I have people, calling me up. But I am very fond of this book. And let's talk about The Clock of Life with Nancy. Good morning.
Good morning, Charlie. Thanks for having me here. I appreciate it.
Well, I love talking to you, and I love talking about the book. And you've got a couple interesting things that I want to talk about, especially about this book. But before we actually get the synopsis and talk about it, would you read that first page that we would like to have you read, just to get us introduced to your style? I love having authors talk about their books, but I like to have them read a little section of it so we get a real feeling for how you attack the problem.
Yeah, a little bit of the style here. Okay. On that first day of school, Mama wrapped her hand around mine, and we walked together into the classroom at Cobb's Creek's County School. I'd been so sheltered about our family's past, not to mention the small-minded ways of Hadley, Mississippi, that I was completely unprepared for what would come. Mama leaned down and whispered, "No need to worry, Jason Lee. Everything will be fine, son." I breathed in the familiar almond cherry scent of her lotion. "Be brave like your daddy was," she said. "He was a hero." Straight away, a lump caught in my throat. Those were the first words she'd spoken to me of him. Until then, I never even wondered about the man. With that, she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and moved toward the door. She turned back and smiled at me before leaving. Despite my initial eagerness to attend school, when I looked around, I felt alone and uneasy with the surroundings. The enormous room, the 5 rows of desks, the green chalkboard along the front wall, the rowdy voices, and the children's faces, dirty and clean, black and white. They were unfamiliar faces and as different from each other as the eggs collected from our chicken coop, except for the 2 boys leaning against the back wall. Their faces were the same, with a wide forehead and pointed chins, but one had a head of hair that looked like he'd never seen a comb, and the other's hair was shaved to the scalp, exposing 3 round sores along the side of his head.
Thank you. And I love the beginning of that because it gets me right into the story. When you say she wrapped his hand around his, it gets to the point that he's very young, and you see that without ever saying it, and I love that. And later on, your description and the blackboard and everything, I just feel that I'm right there in that little classroom. Now, how old is our little heroine here?
At this point in time, he's just entering school, so he's 6.
Here, he's 6 years old.
5 or
he's
6.
A hero. Yeah.
And
then later,
we
shortly.
Yeah, we rapidly get to his teen years.
Teen years.
Yeah, his early teens.
So
15.
It's a coming of age story that takes place in the South at those 2 time periods.
Yes. Yeah, the bulk of the story is written in the early 80s with flashbacks because there are 2 major events that are woven through the book, and that would be the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement.
Exactly.
And how those 2 events affect a family and a town. And
life in America and the world, yeah,
That's right.
It did absolutely that. Well, another thing about your book, you have produced a little trailer, and I'd love to see that because it's so well done, and it's just the voices and everything. It's magnificent. It's what every author should do, but probably doesn't get around to doing, is doing a book trailer after they've finished the writing, knowing that you have to do the marketing and everything.
I know. Well, I was fortunate enough to attend a couple classes at our video club.
Oh.
And I learned how to make the trailer.
Well, you did an excellent job. Let's look at it.
Imagine my surprise when I found out there's an award-winning novel based on my formative years. I'm J.L. Rainey, to everyone except my mama, who still calls me Jason Lee. This story I'm talking about begins back in 1974 in my hometown of Hadley, Mississippi, a place no bigger than a fleet hood on the map. We lived on 13 acres outside of town, just me and my mama, and her brother, Uncle Mooks. Uncle Mooks had served in Vietnam and came back with a nasty head wound and some peculiar wisdom. He liked to say, "The clock of life's always ticking towards the funeral parlor." I guess he gets credit for the title. My favorite part of the story is how spot on it captures the relationship I had with my best pal Samson. But being friends made us prime targets due to deep-rooted attitudes. There were times when figuring out what was right and wrong was as hard as holding on to water. Beyond our moonshine meetings and counterfeiting activities, I've spent my whole life grateful for the things he taught me, like how to be strong enough to ignore what wasn't important, and dreaming was only the first step. My daddy was killed in the same war that damaged Uncle Mooks. I carry his name, but never really knew about the man, until the day I came across the journal he wrote during the time he participated in the Selma to Montgomery March back in 1965. Through that discovery, he taught me the choices you make define who you are. And everyday folks really can make a difference. Don't miss this award-winning novel by Nancy Clan Moran about choosing to do the right thing, just because it's right.
So tell us actually, how did you do that?
Well,
With a phone? Everybody's running around with a phone today, filming, or a small camera, and
yes, we did it. My husband and I went up to. My grandson lives in a rural community, and the boy in the trailer is my grandson.
Oh.
So we had a free actor.
Yeah, you didn't have to. You had to pay union scale for that,
right,
did you?
and his friend. So we just spent the day, kind of finding places to shoot. And I had, as far as the journal that the father
Yes.
Had written,
Mm-hmm.
I wrote it.
You did.
Out, and so when Jason Lee, my grandson, was reading, we just did a video.
Yeah.
So like I say,
Beautifully
I
done.
took some classes here at the video club, and was able to.
Well, let's give a plug for
make
our
the
video
trailer.
club. They do a lot of great things here. They're producing a lot of shows here, and a lot of those shows will end up here on Channel 6. So I like that. And the other thing that you did that caught my interest, because I did the same thing when I was writing a book. I went on an author's journey, and I wanted to see the sights and hear the sounds and feel the room or the countryside or wherever I was, so that I could put it into my book. So tell me about your author's journey.
My friend Shauna and I were in a critique group together,
Mm-hmm.
and we were both writing Southern stories.
Okay.
So I was uncomfortable with what size of a town I needed in order to have the pharmacy and the hardware store and the likes of that. So we basically we flew to Atlanta.
from California? You were both
yeah,
Californians?
she's from Canada. We
Okay.
flew to Atlanta and rented a car and drove drove through Georgia and Mississippi and Alabama
Wow.
for a week. And we scouted out towns, and we scouted out, we just would see things that would fit.
Yeah. So you were taking photographs, and you were probably had your tape recorder out, maybe catching the sounds of some birds in the,
Yeah,
the magnolia trees.
unfortunately, we weren't quite that advanced, but yeah, we.
But seeing it and feeling it
just,
and being there.
That's just having it go through you.
Yeah, and
It
cultivate, yes.
really helps. It
Yeah.
really helps the writing. And I was thinking about fantasy writers and people who write outer space novels. They can't go on a road
No,
trip.
they can't do that. It's all got to come out of their head. And you can do so much on the internet today with Google and all, but still being there and feeling it. As I said, I did one of those. I went 650 miles into Mexico to get the feeling of a small town and what it was like. So I understand that's important.
And it
Write
gave-
what you know, and you don't know the South. How are you going to
Right,
write
and
about
it
it?
gave me the confidence to go forward with the things I thought I wanted to do.
Yes.
And then enhance them with the things we came across.
Well, lucky for our viewers, we have actually a video of part of that trip and what it looked like. Let's play that now.
The writer's life is a solitary life. It's true, but it doesn't have to be that way. Sometimes you need to push away from the desk and hit the road. My name's Nancy Clan Moran, and I'm a writer of fiction. My friend Shauna and I took a trip from Atlanta to New Orleans. Our goal was to take in the spirit of the many small towns that would eventually work their way into our novels. We rented a car and drove, avoiding major highways, big cities, and franchise restaurants. When we left Atlanta, we passed through Emerson and came across Doug's place. The building dates back to 1890, and we couldn't pass it by. I ordered broccoli and cheese soup, creamed corn, and juicy fried chicken cooked to perfection. To honor the first meal of the trip, I gave fried chicken a nod in my novel on 3 occasions. This was for my protagonist's birthday dinner. After a supper of fried chicken so juicy we needed 3 napkins each, Mama brought out the cake she'd worked on all day. On to Rome, Georgia. Shauna had heard about the town and thought it might be the right size for the setting of her story. Walking down Main Street, I came up on a bakery window and saw 2 amazing cakes. We parked nose to the curb in front of Coleman's Bakery. Gracing the front window were styrofoam reproductions of Mrs. Coleman's white frosted cakes in the shape of trumpet swans. First stop the next day was the heartbreaking sight of Cedartown's old business district. The streets were virtually empty, its shops abandoned because the residents had moved on to Walmart and Target. But standing guard, the old town clock stood tall and proud. My story had to have a town clock. Samson pulled a jackknife from his pocket. Check the street, see if anyone's looking this way. I pressed my back against the windowed door and looked down past the town clock. All's clear, and it's 10:45. We crossed the state line into Alabama, leisurely driving towards Anniston when we passed this house. I had already imagined the house and the front porch in my story, but after passing this place, I added a tin roof. The corrugated roof crackled and groaned and popped each day when the heat of the sun rose and fell. In Anniston, Alabama, we found the Top O' the River restaurant. There was no river anywhere. The menu said catfish exceptional, so went in Anniston. Our first stop was always the Grinning Catfish Cafe. 3 long windows stretched across the front, facing Country Road 38, and 3 more overlooked the parking lot. It seemed as though every other town we passed had a business of one sort or another with the name Busy Bee, so I had to include one in my story. Burdette Foster came in. Wally said, "Pull up a chair." "Don't mind if I do," Burdette said. "Waiting on the wife. She's at the Busy Bee under one of those drying helmets. Looks like torture to me." Heading toward Utah, Alabama, we came across a quaint, hand-built produce market on the side of the road. When we went in, there was no one in sight. The store ran strictly on the honor system. An old grocery scale with a bent needle pointed to half a pound, and a stack of small paper bags were next to the bins. A sign above the scale read, "Honor System. Weigh and leave money in box." Shortly after crossing into Mississippi, we entered Newton, and I had finally found the model for the town in my story. Everything I needed was contained in this scenic town of 5,000 people, even a Rexall drugstore. I looked across the street at the blue and orange Rexall sign and thought they should change it to Rex-all. While Wally was gone, I noticed the sweet smell of cinnamon buns drifted down from Coleman's ovens, and the Rexall sign looked all right again. In the end, no Google search or library visit can infuse a story with authenticity, like taking in the scent of a honeysuckle vine along the side of the road, or buying a cup of boiled peanuts at a gas station, or sipping on a glass of sweet tea with lemon. This trip got me away from the desk and helped shape the emotional landscape of my story, The Clock of Life.
Wow, and I'm really happy that you actually worked the RX drugstore into the stories, and you know what page they're on, as our audience knows now, and all those sights and sounds, and the food and the smells and everything comes together. You really feel you're there, and it's wonderful.
Well, thank you. It was well worth
Oh.
In my opinion, it added an awful lot to my to the book.
Like you say, the competence factor alone, if you didn't do that, you'd be making stuff up that you had no idea what it was like, you know. But that's wonderful. Then comes the tough part, right? You have to do some marketing. So how's it been going since the book's been out there? Have you done any marketing? Of course, for the last 2 years, we couldn't do any.
Right. I started out contacting as many book bloggers as I could, and it was it was quite a feat, you know.
Yeah.
But I ended up getting a couple of hundred bloggers that said they would read my book and write a view.
Do you pay for that service? Do you have to pay for that, or
No, you do provide them with a book.
Oh, okay.
But a lot of times you can send it electronically. But there's a lot of them that want the physical book.
Well, do you have the ability to send that? I guess you do as a PDF. You can send
You can send it as a PDF, and I think it's called a MOBI. M-O-B-I.
Yeah, MOBI, yeah. And,
which is sort of a Kindle.
Yeah, it's Kindle.
They can look on their Kindle device.
Right. So, and in addition to that, what did you do? When you first launched, you were able to go out on a tour. Did you do any local bookstores or anything?
I was back when this was published. There was still a bit of a reluctance for independent publishers. And so I did have a little trouble with getting local bookstores to take it, and I didn't have a huge book launch, but it got picked up in a lot of newspapers and some, like I say, the
PR,
blogs.
yeah. Well, I know our local bookstore down in Laguna Beach. They take them on consignment if you're interested, and you haven't done that yet.
That.
Oh, absolutely.
I'll do that.
I've taken the Hummingbird Review that I published for a number of years. I take it down there and do it on consignment, and they'll probably let you come in and do a reading even. So they're good people down there. I'm going to have, I think, the owner and maybe one of the managers come on the show just to talk about books. I love talking about books.
That's great. I'll go on down there and drop your name.
That won't get you too far. Anyhow, and also, we all want to get our books made into movies, right? Don't we? I've tried. I've even gone to the Book Fest up in L.A., and I've gone around and I've met with some some people up there to show my screenplays and all. I know you'd like to have a book turned into a movie, so any news on that line at all?
No. Generally, I'm told to write the screenplay.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I did take a screenplay
I know what you're saying. I know exactly what you're trying to say. Screenplay
I
class.
took a beginning and an intermediate, and I practiced on some of my short stories because the idea of a full-on script was for a beginner was a little daunting. Yeah. So I now know how to format, and and
did you buy
some
the
of
programming
elements.
you need?
Yeah, I did. I bought first edition.
Yeah.
Is that the program? And I have not worked on that because right now I'm working on another novel.
One of the first things you learn, I guess you may have learned this in your first screenwriting class, what to leave in and what to take out.
It's like, I want to be the director.
How do you get past all that?
I can't leave out all my narrative.
I know. And then, Hollywood's got to the highs got to be higher than anything that's ever happened in the story, and the lows have to be lower. So you got to be willing to do that to your baby,
Yes,
So.
That's right.
So you said you're working on another project. I'd like to hear about it.
Well, this one takes place in 2 different time frames. I have a young girl who leaves northern Minnesota and drives cross country to San Francisco for the Summer of Love in 1967.
Right.
And she ends up becoming involved in the anti-war movement, kind of a theme of mine. Mm-hmm. And in 2019, I have a young girl who finds a diary in a thrift store written by my San Francisco girl, 52 years later.
Okay.
So that inspires my modern girl to have a little bit more gumption than she would necessarily, and she ends up getting involved in the Black Lives Matter movement.
Oh,
so they're kind of hopefully parallel journeys. Mm-hmm. And hopefully the diary weaves them together.
How far along are you?
I have not come to the end on my first draft. I'm probably 3/4 done.
Okay.
I don't have the ending quite yet.
Do you plot everything out, or do you just seat of the pants kind of writer?
Yeah, I seat of the pants. Maybe I'm a little bit more. I think about it a lot.
Yeah.
So rarely does it take me.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, but I'm afraid of plotting because I'm somebody who, if I say I'm going to do it that way, I'll stick to it, and it might not be.
Yeah, I've talked to writers that actually not only plot out the beginning and end, which you do need to know that, but then they'll plot out each chapter and what has to take place in it, and then 2 and 3, and go all through the book that way. Mm-hmm. And I found when I wrote my novel, it just came about. I just ended up, writing, and the characters took me places I had no idea we were going. I'm sure that must happen to you, even though...
It does happen. And then I'm going, wait a minute, I just opened a gate and went out into a pasture when I have to get back on the road.
I know. And then, but I felt that I had no idea I was even going to write a novel. I just decided that I was going to do it, and I didn't know how. I didn't take any classes. I didn't go anywhere. But I was talking to an author yesterday, William Kent Krueger, and he never took a writing class in his life. You know how successful he is? 18 books are out there. 19 is coming out in August, and he's got 3 other books that are independent. And So,
He must never do anything else.
well, you know, one thing, we were talking, and it was interesting that we were talking about how he does. He has the same cast of characters. You know how
Yeah.
writing instructors will say to you, take your characters to lunch. Well, he had breakfast, lunch, dinner, stayed, cocktails, and slept over. I mean, he's known that his characters.
Summer parties,
It's almost 20 years, and what he says, it was interesting, is that they end up doing, they get older, these characters that he's carrying forward. I wanted to talk about some other writers today. And do you have anything else you'd like to add about your books or your travels or what you're doing? And
No, I just wanted to mention I do have a collection of short stories.
okay,
And,
tell us about it.
and that is called Like the Flies on the Patio. And there's 11 stories of kind of inconsistent characters.
You said that your novel came out of one of those stories.
Yes, exactly. I was reading a short story in a workshop. The instructor said, "What are you doing for the next couple of years?" And and he said, "Because that's a novel."
Wow.
So I dragged my feet for a year, and then I thought, but he planted the seed.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I'd like to talk about some other authors. We have some authors that have written books, and some of them are new and some are not new. But I'd ask if you would go, Nancy, and I gave you one to read. There's an author, just give us her name and the title of her book, and there's a real short synopsis, so just go with it.
This author, her name is Ivy Malone, and she has a series called Ivy Malone Mysteries. Get ready to meet another feisty senior lady in the series. The determined and curious widowed sleuth, Ivy Malone, will be stopped by nothing, be it death threats, vandals, or the mafia. Be prepared. The books are part of a continuing series and don't always stand alone, would not always stand alone resolutions. So this is a 5-part commitment. And it's Ivy Malone is not the author. It's Laura McCourtney. Sorry.
Yes, that surprised me too. I did the same thing you did. I have one called Call It a Gift. Valerie Hobbs. This came out 2005. This romance novel will remind you that love and adventure spans all generations. Rather than the starry-eyed love of youth, this book handles romance in an inspiring yet realistic way that accounts for its challenges and compromises. The characters in this book navigate relationships with middle-aged children, consider how they want to make the most of life while aging, and set off on a road trip to Yellowstone. That sounds like a fun read. A lot of these books, I have 2 categories. I have readers who were seniors, and I have writers who were seniors.
Right.
And so it's kind of interesting to marry those things.
Well, yeah, and also to just introduce the readers to the writers that write about seniors.
Well, last month's guest started that. There's the romance, and there's later romance, and there must be late romance. I don't know, but it's never too old to fall in love, right? So that's it. And there's another book, How Civil Wars Start, and interesting enough, you know the author, and she's getting rave reviews, and she's been on CNN and NPR.
I know.
Give us a real quick glimpse of what she's up to.
She's a professor at UCSD, and she has been specializing in warring factions for 30 years. And so she finally wrote a book for the masses, not just a book that she needs to publish for the university press.
Right.
This one came out for Penguin.
Well,
And she was on the best-selling list 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
I saw her interviewed on CNN, and I'm anxious to have her here someday. So maybe when things quiet down a little bit for her, either she'll come up and visit you, or we'll take a road show. We could Zoom, but I would love to have her in the studio sometime.
Yeah, well, she's very knowledgeable.
Oh, she's good. She's good, I could tell. Well, that about wraps it up for today. I thank you very much for joining us, and we'll be here the same time, the same place, every Monday at 10:30, and hope you'll come back to see us once again. Charlie Redner saying goodbye.